Good morning, family. Happy Father's Day to the men that are here today. I hope that you guys have big plans. Interestingly enough, Father's Day is the seventh most celebrated holiday in America. And I actually had to stop and think for a minute trying to figure out what other six holidays there were. So you have Easter, Christmas, New Year's, right? You have Mother's Day. And before Father's Day is Valentine's Day. It kind of struck me as odd because, at least until recently, Valentine's Day didn't mean a whole lot without at least a man and a woman. Father's Day is seventh most celebrated holiday in America because only about 70% of Americans have fathers to celebrate. It's pretty staggering compared to the 97% who have mothers. Now, all of this said, I'm not trying to come up here and indicate to you this is a horrible holiday or you guys are all doing horrible jobs. That's not my point. My point is that there is a lot of attacks on masculinity now. Attacks on manliness, attacks on fatherhood, attacks on husbands. I want to briefly go back to this verse that Brother Zacharias read for us today. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than heaven, what can you do? Deeper than Sheol, what can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and summons a court, who can turn him back? For he knows worthless men. When he sees iniquity, will he not consider it? I bring this up because this should be how we see fathers. This should be how a child sees their father. So to the younger people that are listening, you're not going to understand everything your dad does. You're not going to understand every decision he makes, every instruction he gives you, just like you would be foolish to try and assume that you're going to understand every commandment of God. Even if you could memorize them, you'd never understand all of them. Not really. There's always going to be some you don't understand why he gave them to us. You're not going to understand why it matters. You're not going to understand why it applies or why it's connected. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's a child's job to understand that the father's understanding is greater than theirs and to trust in that. The really cool thing is, and this is something that was kind of drilled into me as a new Christian, having not really grown up with a solid father figure, and it started when Bailey and I went to premarital counseling because obviously parenthood plays a factor in that conversation. And the minister who was doing our premarital counseling kind of had a lot of similar situations growing up. And he constantly and consistently told me, you need to understand that whether you had a father growing up or not doesn't matter anymore because you've got an entire book dedicated to you to describing the perfect father. And so this really comes down to two things. People's need to understand fathers from the perspective of godliness, and for fathers to understand themselves from a perspective of godliness. Proverbs 14:26, and this is one of the reasons why godly fathering is so important. 26 says, in the fear of the Lord one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. Do you understand, men, that your faith in God, your belief in God, your obedience to God is your children's most safest place? When the world is not going right, you teach them what to rely on. And if you're teaching them to rely on just dad, right, because dad can fix it, dad can handle it, dad can carry it, dad can go talk to him, whatever needs to be done, dad can do it. But you teach them to do that, and what does that end up showing them? Well, it teaches women that they need to find a husband that has no faults and that cannot break. And it teaches men that that's who they need to grow up to be, that they can't show any weakness, that they can't be vulnerable. And that's just not accurate, and it's not healthy. Right? Because here's the thing. Most men with a healthy understanding of who they are as men show a certain vulnerability with one person. And that's their wife. That's why we get married. Right? Because I don't get married because I don't like what I'm doing with my life. Right? I as a man, love what I did as a man when I was single. I loved sitting and doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. Regardless of how stupid it ended up being, I enjoyed that. Right? I got married for other reasons. I got married because I got tired of being alone against the world. I got married because there was value in that relationship. But the thing is, our children only get to see a fraction of our marriage. And if they never see us vulnerable in that moment with another person, if they are never allowed to see a man as flawed or weak, they will grow up thinking he's perfect. Or at least believing he thinks he's perfect. What man are they going to find in their lives that compares to that? Or if it's a boy, how is he ever going to feel like he measured up? So by actually projecting this image of perfect manhood to our children, we set them up for failure. That's why godliness must play a factor. They must understand it's not my abilities as a man that you should feel secured in. It's not my strength or my endurance or my intelligence that you should be relying on. When the world goes wrong, you turn to me because I know God on a deeper level than you do. That's what I want my kids to rely on. That's what I want their safe place to be. Can you say the same? What is the most valuable thing you're giving to your children? Because setting yourself up as the image is not going to work for them in the long run. It feels good, for sure. It feels good when we know our children think we can do no wrong and we can fix anything. It feels good that when my daughter gets scared of something, she comes running to dad. But ultimately, what happens when I'm the one that's scared? Because that happens a lot more than I tell people about. And she needs to know that I, as a man, I'm going to fail. And there's somebody even I have to turn to. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 3 through 4. And if you want to research more on being a father and emulating God as a father, I encourage you to look through Proverbs because the book is all about it. Proverbs 3, 3 through 4 says, "Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." There's a really interesting wording here that doesn't seem to make very much sense, and that's it referring to the heart as a tablet. And only one other place in the Bible do we actually see this kind of language. And I've talked about this before. In Deuteronomy, we find what the Jewish people called the Shema. And it used a similar language. When it said to write it on your heart, it was actually not quite a great way of translating the word that was given. You see, the word that's given in the Shema is actually more closely related to a mason carving a statue. It's not the same as somebody writing on a piece of paper. It's something much more permanent, much more immutable. God here is giving us an idea of what it means to be the kind of man that our children can grow up to look after, or to look up after. Love and faithfulness are not stereotypically traits we give to them. And that, in my opinion, is the biggest shame of them. The traditional man he's strong and he's brave and he's unmovable. Sometimes unforgiving because he expects so much of the world. The kind of guy who's going to get the job done no matter how hard the job gets. The kind of man who pulls himself up by his own bootstraps and needs no one or anything. He goes to church on Sunday, and the rest of the week he lives his life how he needs to live it in order to make sure his family's taken care of. That's the traditional man. But here's the thing, where's the priorities in that story? The Bible doesn't say you have to be broad of shoulders to be a father. The Bible doesn't even say that you have to be particularly brave to be a good father. The Bible certainly doesn't tell you to hold a grudge or be unforgiving or to have unrealistic expectations. In fact, this passage here is describing one of the most godly traits you can have as a man. Love and faithfulness. And it's so important. And he says you need to hang it on your neck to weigh your very head down with it and to carve it upon your life force. Right? Because the heart is much more than just talking about how we feel. Okay? When we're looking at the Bible, the people in the Bible were not stupid people, and the idea that your heart pumps blood is not a new idea. Okay, that's not new science. Okay, so we talk about the blood being life, and what gives life, that's the heart. And so what is important, the things that are important in your life, you write on that which gives you life. And this passage is saying that for the people of God, what should be written on your heart is faithfulness. To remain steadfast, to place your trust, and to find the evidence. The really cool thing is I think that there's a very good reason why it says faithfulness should be written on the tablet of the heart. And I think there's an equal good reason why it says love should be tied around one's neck. Love is all about bringing yourself down. Love is about understanding that we're not above other people. And so for me, when the passage says love should be tied around your neck, to me, I actually see it as a need for me to bow my head in humility. Does that sound like a stereotypical man to you? Humility is not even a trait we often give to men. We like our men proud to have accomplished something. But God said he wants his men to be servants. So humble that they're willing to put on a towel and to wash another man's foot. 3 John chapter 1 and verse 4 says, I have no greater joy than to hear my children are walking in the truth. Now think about this. The stereotypical man that I've been describing to you finds his pleasure and joy in his own accomplishments. The problem is, his children only play a small part of those accomplishments. Yet John writes that the greatest pleasure a man can know is to know that his children are children of God, walking in the truth, not just understanding what God has said, but living accordingly. I have met a great many people who have misunderstood what it meant to be a good father, even before I knew what it meant to be a father. I remember growing up with the kinds of people that would talk about their child as if it's some collateral for a promise, right? And this is a very cultural thing, but to say that I swear on my family, to swear on my blood, to swear on my child, is a very common thing among a lot of people nowadays. The Bible says that we're not to swear by anything, neither heaven, which is God's crown, nor earth, which is his footstool. To me, that just seems like such a mundane way of looking at a child. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people that have confused Hallmark with reality. I don't see my child as having sprouting angel wings. I'm under no false idea that my child can do no wrong. My child does plenty wrong. But me having a child took very little work, if I'm being honest. Me calling myself a father took very little work, if I'm being honest. And my pride in having a child is such a low bar to set for myself. The greatest joy I have experienced as a father so far is the first time I got to hear my daughter say amen. And more importantly, when she understood that went along with a prayer. Now, me as being somebody who didn't understand that until I was like 25, thought it was a pretty big deal that she understood it at 1. But my point is that I could find a lot of things to take joy in. I could take joy in the fact that I finished college. I could take joy in the fact that I plan on going back. I could take joy in the work that I do here. And while I want to tell you I feel accomplished in the work that I do in ministry, and while I find enjoyment in it, my real joy is found at home. The fact is, I wouldn't be half the man of God I am without that purpose in my life. And humility has come really quite easy to me in the last year and a half. Every day I wake up and I think about what I'm expected to do or what I need to do today as a parent. Now, granted, that list is much shorter than I'm sure Bailey wakes up with. But it's still there. The fact that I'm a father and a husband really marks every decision I make anymore. And so I get to start my day out, and usually Eden winds up in bed with us at some point in the night because, it's just not, why would you fight? Why would you fight on something you're going to enjoy anyway? So I usually wake up to her sleeping next to me. And so every morning I get to wake up and have the biggest symbol in my life of just how inadequate for the job I am. Right? Because as I've said before, I've spent most of my life learning the very valuable lesson that I am completely incapable of actually taking care of myself. And now I have a 1-year-old that relies on me. That's a huge thing. And you're a fool if you think you can do that by yourself. You're a fool if you think you can be successful at that kind of a job without God. There is unfortunately a great number of people in this world that think they can separate God from other areas of their life. People who think that they can act how they need to act to be successful in business because, well, that's church and this is business, and those are two different things. Unfortunately, there's a lot of men who have traditionally held that godliness has nothing to do with how they parent. I'm not going to get into a huge argument of why the last 2 generations really have failed as fathers, because the fact is I think that Just as we talked about this morning with the death of Jesus, I think there's plenty of blame to go around. And ultimately, you can choose women to complain that all the good men are gone, chivalry is dead, fathers are no longer necessary, whatever you want. You can sit and complain and argue about how the world is, or you can go and find yourself a man who understands how important God is to him. Because I promise you, the man who thinks he can do it himself isn't going to stick around for too long. Because men tend to only fail for so long before they give up. It's a pretty common trait, actually. And I think men are a little bit better at this than a lot of women. Understanding that at some point hanging in there just makes you look like a fool. And so I'm only going to fail at a job for so long before I go look for another job. So if you find yourself a man who doesn't think God is necessary to get the job done, I promise you he's going to fail at that job. Nobody's up for that task. Men, you're in the same boat. You can sit around and complain about women are so strong-willed and women don't think they need men and they're so independent and blah, 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 and they want to parent how they want to parent, and I don't want to be some henpecked husband, blah, 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 blah. My only job is a wallet anyway, so why do I even need beer? You can complain about anything you want, but at the end of the day, you're either going to have value as a father and be there and do what's necessary and take the hits on the chin, or you're going to do what 30% of fathers in America have done, and you're going to walk away and be remembered as a failure throughout eternity. %30. Now here's something for you. Just for you to understand how important that 30% is. A study done in Switzerland, confirmed by the Lutheran Church as a whole and confirmed by the Southern Baptist Church as a whole and confirmed by Harding University of Theology, found that, and this is the highest number I could find according to this kind of a study, in a household where the woman or the mother is a regularly attending member and the father is not, 18%. 18% of those children will grow up to be regularly attending members. All this is not to say that mother's faith is not important, but there's two things that I think play a factor in this. Children tend to get how they understand the world from their mothers. And they tend to understand how they are to relate to the world or how they interact with the world from their father. So they can understand that God exists and that God is great, God loves them, and it's important to have God be a part of your life. But what that ends up looking like usually comes from dad's example. So if you're the kind of father that only comes twice a year, then that's how they're going to relate to God. If you're the kind of father that insists that you're here every time those goes over and you get involved in everything, they're going to understand that that's how they want to relate to God. Does that make sense? Mothers have an important part of parenting. But there are some things that men were designed to do better. That's really why God has separated the roles of man and woman. And understand this, if you're somebody who's in a position where that's not an option, maybe you're a single mother or you're a child without a father in the home, understand this. This doesn't mean that you're without hope. What it means is you need to find somebody to help fill the gap. You need to find somebody to stand in that gap. To be God's example in your life and your kids' life. It's part of the value of church. We have in here over 20 godly men who've decided that God is an important part of their life, who's a priority for them. Men who are willing to stand in the gap for others. But whether you're a mother, or whether you're a father, or whether you're a child, understand you are not going to succeed at this alone. If you are going to try to do this without God, or you're going to try to do this without men, or God forbid you try to do it without a woman, you are not going to succeed. God did not design things that way. There is a reason children only come from the union of a man and a woman. And that's because both are necessary. Don't make the mistake of listening to the world tell you otherwise. So for you fathers out there about ready to celebrate what realistically is the only holiday we're given as men, I want to encourage you guys to understand your value, the grand scheme, the grand plan of God. No matter how much the world tries to marginalize you, God has deemed you of infinite importance. So much so that the entire plan could not have gone off without you. Don't allow the world to undermine your value. And don't allow yourself into fooling yourself into thinking your children don't need you or your wife doesn't need you. They need you even when they think they don't. Understand that I will be spending my day praying for you. Because more than I ever have in my life, I understand how tough it is to convince yourself day after day after day. And sometimes you feel like you're just hitting a grindstone. You get the job done, you come home, you go to bed, you try to do the same thing tomorrow. And sometimes women understand this. Sometimes men are in a position where that's about all we can handle. Right? Because we don't vocalize what stresses us most of the time. I know I don't. Bailey might think I do, but I only vocalize it once I get to a point where I can't handle it. I should tell you how stressed out I allow myself to be. Men tend to suffer in silence. We'll take it and take it and take it until the point where we have nothing left to give. Men, that's your fault. It is. It's your fault for listening to people tell you that that's how it should be. It's your fault for accepting that in your marriage. For believing, for doing your wife the discourtesy of believing she can't handle it. Communicate with her. You called her a partner. God calls her a helpmeet, so utilize that resource. Walk life with her. And women, pay attention to him. Pay attention to him and understand that if he's stressed out, he'll get the job done. But he's only going to be able to handle that for so long. Look out for one another. Love each other. Remain faithful to God. And you'll find that being a father is not nearly as hard as it once was. I pray for you, and I hope that you'll each pray for one another. This is one of the highest callings we'll ever receive as men. I hope that you feel as honored as I do. I want to close out this evening with a prayer, but first, I want to offer an opportunity. I know that if I'm struggling with fatherhood and being a husband, I know that there are people in here that are in the same position. Women, if you're struggling with valuing your man, with valuing men in general, I want to offer you an opportunity. So if you need prayers, we ask that you come forward and ask for the prayer. We have a euphemism we use in society: squeaky wheel gets the grease. We want to pray for you if you're in need. So make the need known so that we can do that. Don't deny us that privilege. If you're looking this morning to ask for help from your fellow saints, we ask that you bring that forward as well. If you're looking for the waters of baptism to be washed clean of your sins, be raised up a new creation with a new purpose and a new hope, somebody who is better equipped to fill the role that the world has given you. We ask you to bring that need forward too. Whatever you have, bring it forward and let us serve you as we stand and sing this.